do the alien. It's appropriate for you're an outlaw or something.
All right. Okay. Do it. Tonight's theme is what?
Space Cowboy.
Is
The laws of the metaverse, or what's
laws
the
of the
best way to?
metaverse?
Yeah, Metaverse.
Yeah,
Law in the Metaverse. Is that Snail?
Law in the metaverse.
I think that's fine.
All right.
Law in the metaverse.
That works.
You're right.
All right. Where's Ghost here? Okay. There you go.
No talking.
What?
Oh, he has
You
an
aren't seeing the
avatar. You
avatar
can't
one?
see him. You might have to look
Let
away,
me-
Ghoster.
Let me switch. Let me switch and switch back. Maybe that'll fix it. For
Does
you.
everybody see the three of us on stage and then a cowboy in the front?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah, that's it.
All right. Hold on.
Cowboys morphing. Oh. No,
You
still
see it now,
cowboy.
Ghoster? You see it now? Okay. All right. Here we go. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Endgame with your hosts Nomino, Snail, and Psych. Oh, tonight we will be discussing law in the metaverse. So, take it away, guys.
Nice.
Thank you! Yay!
I always
Wait, everybody
wanna add
cheers
another
if you're excited! Yay! Look at us.
Nomino, Popo, and
Yeah.
But yes, Snail doesn't have an
Excited.
O at the end of his name, so it doesn't make
I know,
sense.
It didn't necessarily make sense, but I had to do it because it was my one opportunity. So,
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
It was funny. Yeah.
Hey everybody, welcome to Endgame. We're going to talk about, the future, what we think is going to happen, and specifically today, sort of the metaverse, this place that we're all populating together and where this is going to go. How are we going to fucking make this work? There's so many of us. We need laws or something to keep us together before it all collapses. But before we get there, we're going to check in with someone from the community and hear what they think about the future. And this week, we're going to check in with Evolved Ant. So could you please come step up in front over here? Hope you're not. Hey, man.
Yes.
Hey.
Oh,
You can't get on the
come out.
stage.
Not too
Come
far.
to
Don't
the-
step
Straight
too
up
far.
to the.
The wooden. Yeah.
Circle.
Yeah. The circle.
Oh, there's good.
Yes. Okay. What's up?
So, yeah, in general, how do you feel about the future? Are you sort of optimistic, pessimistic? What's your general feeling?
Well, my general feeling is based on what I've personally experienced so far with the way things are going. And for me, most of the things have been in a positive direction. So I'm more of the optimistic type in that regard. I feel like the way things are going, it's going to be moving in a positive way that helps people, because I've met a lot of people in virtual reality that have started off having, everyone has their own baggage, their own issues that they have to work through. And what I've experienced is that the more time they spent in the virtual space interacting with people, the more they've been able to overcome a lot of issues. And I think that's a super positive thing. And so I see that the more people who have the virtual space as a sort of outlet where they can express themselves in a way that they feel safe and that they can take as much as they want or as little as they want, is going to help a lot of people, the more and more people that get that opportunity. So I see it in the future, it being a situation where there's going to be not only the few people who accidentally encounter this, but it's going to get to a point where it's widely known as something that does that for people. And so I think it's an optimistic view that it's a good thing, and I see it as a positive that's going to keep growing.
Yeah. And how long have you been? I think that's amazing. I think that's what I see too. And I think you're very unique also because, you also have been around since, 3.5, 4 years in VR chat. So, what's I guess how has that affected the way that you've seen VR chat change from the beginning towards now? That gives you that hope for the future.
Well, initially when I first went into VR chat 3 or so years ago, it was still a new technology. It wasn't as immersive as it is now. And a lot of times people would come in and you'd make friends with people, but you didn't really get as close as people do today. Before, when you got close to people, they were like, hey, my personal space, and people would back off. Today, it's kind of switched in a way where it's now people want to get close to each other and they want to express deeper bonds. And I feel like at least for me personally, when I came back to VR chat after a break I took, and I seen that contrast, initially I had a barrier in front of me where I seen people were able to bond more, but I wasn't able to overcome that wall. But once someone else overcame that wall for me, it kind of like opened up and the wall came tumbling down in a way. It was like, oh, this is actually completely okay and it's actually really nice. And then because of that, I'm able to get closer to people, and that kind of experience made me realize like VR chat is completely different from, 2 or more years ago. Now it's turned into people are more comfortable because I think the increased immersion with everyone having like hand tracking now, and some people even have like full body tracking, and we have facial gesture animation overrides, better lip syncing, eye track. It all came together to the point where it isn't just some game you're playing where you're like, okay, I see someone in 3D. Now it's like you can actually feel like you're establishing a connection with people, and I think that kind of made the switch flip over to the situation where you can be close to people, and it feels like you're actually having a relationship with people. Like you can bond with people, and I think it's a positive thing.
It definitely, it's something that comes up a lot. Like a couple of weeks ago when we talked to the anime community, that was like a big part of that talk. But it comes up like almost every week here, where it's like it does make me really optimistic too. Like when we get stuck in like the doom and gloom and get scared of a bunch of stuff happening, that this is like one of the main components that gets me pretty excited about the future, because it does seem like such a relief. Like you can see it being just a great relief for so many people in the world, and that could have like a significant change. Snail, do you have any thoughts on that?
I'm kind of curious. I don't know if E-Man is trying to raise a hand to.
Yes, that is true. I didn't want to interrupt, but I just wanted to ask a question real quick.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm still very new to VR chat, so I was just wondering, is there any way people can like put in information what we can do to improve it, or what is kind of like people are having a hard time with? So it's just one of those things that the developers can get together and say, there's a lot of people saying they want to see this in VR chat, and they want to eliminate this or whatever. So am I too new to
Are
know
you on
what's
Discord?
going on,
Are you on the Are you in the Discord channel? You on?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Are you on the Discord channel?
No, I'm not.
If you join VR Chat's Discord, there's a link to a website, VR Canny, where you can suggest things and people can vote on them to increase the visibility to the developers of VR Chat. So that's one way that.
So does that seem to be helping, or because I'm just wondering in this room, is anybody in here like, I wish I can see this in VR Chat, or I wish not to see this? So I'm just wondering about the people in the room.
We've had some decent like feedback where a few features sort of go into the canny. Enough people vote them up, and then there's sort of the discussion on feasibility and whether or not we can do it. And yeah, there have definitely been things that have been incorporated just from sort of the community says this, and enough people put together enough votes or whatever behind it, and it becomes a thing. And
so Canny is almost a community-based like
it's
conglomerate, like social, and a bunch of people come together as a community to decide and vote. Not even though not everyone from the community goes there, but some people go, and then they decide to vote on things, and those are the issues that are kind of brought up that are the primary VR issues, kind of thing.
It ends up being a little bit more sort of bugs and feature based than some of the other things, which I assume that we'll be discussing, sort of the self-governance and maintenance and like sort of social concerns and growth pains and stuff like that doesn't really seem to be done through the canny, which is sort of I guess kind of the topic here, which is how do we solve that? How do we build our long-term scaling solution for social issues? And
it's tricky, right? It's not immediately obvious. Like when you ask that question and you look around the room, like, does anyone have suggestions or things that they want, or like we're talking about now, because we live in this dimension, we're talking about changing the rules of the dimension that we all live in. Like it's a little bit different than fixing a bug in a video game, isn't it? Like it feels like the stakes are higher, but
Yeah.
maybe that's just in my head.
Well, that's what getting back to Evolve, what you're talking about in terms of the people having improved experiences and seeing people change as a result of joining VR chat and the positive impact that it's having on people's lives. I think that's really interesting.
Well, I think that the thing with the canny is that it's more of a feature requests, bug issue reporting, and yada yada. But what we're coming to realize is that virtual reality and the social aspect of that is kind of opening the doors for so much more deeper things, deeper issues that aren't the type of things you can just say, hey, we're having this issue here posted on the canny. It's turning into like, no, these are like fundamental things that affect the core issues of like the whole concept of being in a social platform on such a deep level that it isn't something you could just post a post about and say, hey, vote on this. It's more of a like, these are things we should probably discuss as a community because it's kind of all brand new and things that aren't typically talked about because it's like it's a whole new, it's like the Wild West in a way, you know? It's like we're all learning this together. And because of that, it's like you kind of feel like you want to have a platform where that can be discussed as a community because sometimes an individual doesn't have the best answer for those deeper, you know, it's like a plumber trying to fix the plumbing in like a whole like a warship, you know. It's like him alone is not enough. You need a group of people to work together and look at all the different issues involving that plumbing and say, okay, we need to consider X, Y, Z, A, B, C, and consider all those things together. It's like it's a much more deeper issue than something at the surface level. So
I think one of the things that complicates that is that a lot of the issues that you'll find with social interaction are like rougher issues to discuss and hard issues to quantify and write a bug for, where, for example, interacting between avatars is kind of a very interpersonal social thing, and how do we do this in such a way that, you know, you're not opening up abuse, but also you need to be opening up that humans are interactive people. Like we do, there is an intimacy that you can experience that you can't when you just phase through everybody. And these are sort of really tricky questions that, you know, how do you even have the conversation about what degree of physical contact? How do you like sit down and write the rules that need to go into programming so that you have sort of like, you need to program a consent model sorts of things in order to do these, which is a huge step back and view what do we want, like how do we want this world to work, and being honest with sort of who we are as a people, and that has a lot of hard conversations.
Interesting. Well, I think we should. I mean, that's like, yeah, that's a. I think that's.
Yeah,
really
we're there. There's no need for like a segue or a transition. I feel like we're now into the main topic, right?
Yeah, and
So
I just want to ask Evolve. I want to ask you one last question about where do you see it going? Like what we're talking about right now. Like, what do you see in 1 year from now, or something like that? Where like, what do you think is going to be happening at that time, or what would you like to see happen at that time?
So honestly, like I said, I see that there's going to be more growth and more people that have become aware of the benefits of being in a social VR platform and how that's helpful for people. But kind of like what Snail is touching on here, I do think that that the more that happens, the more hard questions are going to be raised as far as that close social interaction with people and what does that mean and how does that relate to, you know, the real world and the virtual world, and, you know, what are the things that are the same, what are things that are different. So I think it's going to be interesting, and hopefully people are open-minded and are willing to like see virtual reality as like an opportunity to not be too strong with the hammer, so to speak, in my personal view. But I'm more along for the ride and seeing how the wave takes me, seeing how it takes people and hoping that people are, generally smart enough and committed enough and invested enough to want to do the right thing when they make those decisions that are going to affect the platform as a whole.
Interesting. Wow. Well, thanks for. I mean, this has been very interesting, especially knowing you for this long. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I thought you were going to say that. All right. Thank you, Vault Ant. If you do
Yep,
have,
no problem.
if you do want to jump in with a comment, you might have to step forward because even if you raise your hand, sometimes it's kind of hard to see you. Oh my God, are you ready to go before we even get going here?
Yes. Let's just do it fast, and then we can. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, line up. So you want to line up on the behind the wooden circle if you have a question. So yeah, that's.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Oh, you're fine.
So, what I'm seeing lately is concerning Metaverse. Oh my God, you're in my face. I'm sorry. Is that I'm seeing, well, and I'm doing it myself, is that people are ripping maps and characters from games, and concerning that, some companies will have in the future some issues with that. So we have to, raise the question.
Square Enix.
What is it? Yeah, Square Enix will definitely have a problem with it. What is okay to rip from? Like, what can we do? As far as, making maps, making characters, what can we do?
Yeah. Well, I think you're asking about a law specifically, and I think I think that's kind of what we're here to talk about is the laws of the metaverse, and so that's like what interests are there going to be to have what laws and everything like that. That's going to be kind of a topic, a whole.
But that's that's less like the laws of the metaverse. That's like the actual law and how it's like affecting the metaverse, right? It's about like importing assets, not how we're governing ourselves. And I think we should address it, but let's not spend too much time. Like, because we've talked about it before, and I still have no idea what's going to happen because at some point, Square Enix and whoever else it seems like they have to get, like, Nintendo to this day shits on people who put their stuff on YouTube, right? Like, they'll put these, reviews up or fun videos that use Nintendo, like, games or whatever, and they'll get millions of hits, and it's free advertising, and Nintendo hates it, and they take away the advertising money. So like it's a weird backwards thing where I still don't understand why they're making those decisions to sort of keep assets out of like not letting us celebrate.
Yeah.
Do you want the quick answer to that, Nonomo, about why they're doing that? So the quick answer is U.S. IP laws. Basically, if you don't defend your IP, you can lose it, and that's all there is to it. So if they let somebody use Mario and they don't contest it, then there could be.
We're talking about intellectual property.
Yeah.
Just in case people don't know what IP means. Yeah.
Yeah, but that's the reason why Nintendo comes after things like that.
Is it the same with Square Enix or whatever you guys are talking about?
Yes.
I would assume it would be the same with any company that has
any company. Yeah. And also another thing is that.
Well, actually,
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Okay. Would characters also, if we're making them, modeling them so that they work in VR chat, be considered, fall under, Creative Commons?
That would be your intellectual property.
Like if I draw Mickey Mouse at home on a sketch pad, am I breaking the law?
Generally speaking,
can I put my 2 cents in this?
It's fan art and everything.
You get 10 lashings right now.
To a certain extent,
is it still fan art when it's in here?
If you're developing a character within the likeness
my 2 cents on
character.
Oh wait, so sorry, whoever's talking, you're kind of quiet. Could you step forward? I can't quite hear you.
Awkward. So generally speaking, when you're developing a character within the likeness of another IP, this still remains that the company that owns that IP of that character owns the IP of that character. regardless of its likeness, which is the reason why most companies have been able to shut down community-based projects or shut down the development of any character that has been developed within the likeness of that character. Basically, if you're developing a sorry to put you on the spot, but if you're developing a game that is about Sonic the Hedgehog, and you include the likeness of Sonic the Hedgehog, then the entire game itself can be shut down because Sonic the Hedgehog.
It's actually not necessarily the case because there's fan art and things like that, and if he created that on his own in an app or something and has uploaded it, it's not, and he's not making money from it and stuff. It's, you know, I think it's but I don't think
it's still within the ownership of the company that owns the license of that IP. For example,
depending on what he does with it.
If I decided that I wanted to recreate a version of one of the original Unreal Engine games, right? So Unreal Tournament 2 or 2004 or whatever, for example, and I decided that I wanted to release that completely free, agnostic of any licenses, and just purely a fan-made project, right? Epic Games, still the holder of the original IP, are entitled to completely close down and just stop any development that I have on my project, right?
Yep.
Because they
Only
have
because
the
laws are
original.
fucked.
Well, I mean, look, laws are fucked everywhere, right? We cannot ignore that. The question
thing
is,
you made that by hand.
Within our own, but still, though, I decided to make my own Unreal Engine project. I still
think that
decided to make my own
I think there's a lot of
Unreal
things here
Tournament,
that we could get into talking about, but I don't think necessarily that right now is the best time. Hey, Alyssa.
Okay, well, fair enough.
Yeah. No, I think it's interesting, but I think what we're getting into right now is just something that we haven't really talked, kind of introduced the topic and gotten Snail's thoughts about this topic and stuff yet. So let's just take a second.
Let's let you guys end it. Like, can you guys actually, like, because you were going to say something? Is it still related to this?
Yeah, it's still related to this.
Can you conclude that?
So let's just get two quick. Let's get two quick thoughts, which is fine. Like we like, and then we'll.
What it should be, or for a degree, what it is when you make something or use something that is someone else's intellectual property. If you're not either one making sort of a monetary gain from that, or two, taking away the possibility from the original creator of the intellectual property to make their gain or whatever, then it should be fine. But if you're like, if someone, say in VR chat, bringing it back to VR chat, if someone's like, hey, can you rig a model of, fucking Cloud Strife for me, he's like, sure. But it becomes an issue when they're like, I'll give you $5 to rig a model of Cloud Strife wearing a tutu. Then it sort of hits that don't do it zone, even though, I mean, if you chuck them in a tutu, it's almost like you're falling under parody.
Yeah, they're making money from IP. Yeah, exactly.
You shouldn't either, one, make money from someone else's intellectual property, or two, take away their ability or remove their business. Like, if you build an Unreal Engine, if you build an Unreal Engine version of an old Unreal game, then you're possibly taking away the ability for people to go back and play Unreal Engine 1 because they'll do that.
Yeah, this is also by singing. You can perform a song that someone else has written, and it's fine, even in front of a live audience or whatever, because it's an artistic expression of that song. So, yeah, exactly. If you're making money off of it, so that's where it comes. But also, I think what we want to focus on today too is, I think, not necessarily the laws of the real world, which is something that is very complex, and people, spend hundreds of thousands of dollars getting degrees to figure out the details of. But I think that what we're talking about, what we would want to focus on at least, and these are important issues, really, we could do a whole, I think, show on the real world's legal issues and stuff like that, about how that applies to VR chat. But we're really talking about the rules of the metaverse, the community and the culture that comes together and kind of decides on what the rules are and kind of tries to do that, and there are parallels to the real world, like the social contract that people have, where they the idea that people have basically agreed to give up some rights to agree to laws in order to have like safety and basic needs met and things like that, the kind of idea of the social contract. But what's going to happen in VR chat? What's going to happen there, in terms of the rules and the ways that communities regulate themselves and stuff like that? I think that's going to be, and it doesn't necessarily have to reflect the in real life law, which is an interesting topic that I think we should continue talking about. But it could be different as well. At least that's the sense that I've gotten from talking with Snail so far. It's a really interesting subject. But yeah, Tara, what did you? One last quick thing before we get Snail's thoughts on this.
One thing that branches into that, Raven, I don't know where you went, is use whatever the fuck you want as long as you're not selling it.
Oh yeah, I'm
and
not
then,
selling it at all.
Okay, then use it. Doesn't matter. But you can use it, but that doesn't mean whoever fucking made it or whatever else, whoever has ownership of it, won't get mad. And if they do get mad, then real laws apply, and then either you get fucked or all of us get fucked. So,
but someone is going to get fucked.
It wouldn't be on VR chat. It would be on the freelancer.
I want to be fucked.
Well,
okay, thank you.
Not here.
Yeah. Also, see, that's a great. Wait, I don't know who just said that. Who was that? Kara?
Hey, what's up?
Was that Spirit? Maybe.
It was.
Sonic?
It was your boy
Sonic. Yeah. Yeah. Well, we gotta follow VR chat's community guidelines. So, oftentimes I think that's important. So we can't necessarily be as sarcastic as we want, especially at Endgame. But and that's what we're here to talk about, honestly. And can I ask you to wait for the next point, because I really want to hear from Snail and what he has. So, but it's been very interesting talking. So, but if you, yeah. So yeah, Snail. I wanna hear your thoughts on this. I mean, I'm curious. What led you to be interested? And Sonic, also, if you can move towards the back perimeter, because you have a kind of bigger avatar as well, so everyone can see and everything like that. People are. I think that one thing is that I know you're in desktop, but in VR, it's a whole looking up on to people and everything, and it feels real, like you're there. So
I can actually see
over. Snail, what led you to be interested about this topic in the first place?
I mean, there's a bit of a sort of up and down history with some interactions that I've had in the past, but sort of to bucket it all and sort of synopsize and whatnot, as I can see it, the laws in the virtual reality sort of space, I kind of mentally split them into, I want to call them like physical laws, which are the ones that are decreed by the engineers, the software, the platform. And then there are like the social laws, which are sort of built by the people and how they self-moderate. And so I sort of, depending on the interplay between them, certain platforms have much more strict physical laws where it's say you can't upload custom avatars. And then other places sort of are, I think right now we're trying to figure out how the social laws work, which is where you see, like nowadays the hub has these plastered posters that say like, chill out, this is the hub, don't be too crass, don't do too many terrible things. And we have sort of certain avatars and things like this that you can get in trouble for using. You don't like put super lewd avatars on, and these are sort of this mix of social / physical things where you can get banned or we can just remove certain avatars from accounts. And then on the other hand, there's like the social aspects where people will just block you if you're too, in somebody's face. And yeah, for here, I don't exactly know how it'll evolve, but I am super concerned that minor decisions made today will snowball. And this will be things like, if it turns out that it's a problem for people to do. I don't know. We find that people are going abusive with some feature or whatever, and it's causing enough problem in sort of the social level. This will grow up to become a problem that engineers fix, and they will fix it by making it like remove that feature or permanently add a thing that prevents people from ever doing this. And this is more
Are those
real
the
than I
laws?
think. Like
Is that what you think are the laws of the metaverse?
yeah, these are the sort of things where I feel like if it gets to a point that VRC or somebody implements like rules that say you can't do this, that is one degree of law that. Oh, sorry.
Well, something I sort of thought about while you were explaining all that, I think a good example is physical intimacy and touching. Like, and I don't think it's as big of a deal anymore, but I remember when I first came in here, there was like, do we have an option to turn off your personal bubble, right? Where like people
Yes.
disappear when you get too close to you. And I remember that being a big thing in alt space and rec room and whatever.
Yeah, it's too big.
And sort of like, so the problem is if we allow people to get close to each other, you can abuse that, right? And you can harass people. And you could easily see that becoming like there being an outcry, and the engineers just go like, well, here's a solution. You can't get within 2 feet of a person. And boom, that becomes a physical law of the universe now.
Yeah.
Right? They've made a decision, and now it's built into the physical reality that we live in that I can't actually come within 2 feet of you or whatever. But now they've eliminated this huge component. Like the side effect is that we lose the physical intimacy, which is sort of an interesting component here that like people are like really, getting into. So
well,
I don't know. Is that sort of what you mean? Like that was my example.
Absolutely. That is like exactly on point. And if you remove these things and the next platform mimics, well, this works on this platform, so they assume personal bubbles, you get a potential for just, it will take years until somebody fixes it.
But I think like at Oculus Connect, they had a whole session on moderation and why it's needed and stuff. And I was able to learn about like Oculus's, kind of thoughts on all those kinds of things. And like, and it's interesting. Like this is a really interesting thing that people put a lot of thought into, and that there's like belief systems about, because it is as important as what you're saying. It is a law, and it does influence people's behaviors a lot. But it's also interesting that what is our social contract in VR chat? Like we're all choosing to use VR chat and not alt space right now, for example. So like why are we doing that? And what are we choosing to use? And ultimately it is a product of a company. That is a truth. But I think that, and so then therefore, if the company has influence over the rules of the community, that's an interesting and really important thing to talk about. And I guess, and no matter what you were saying too, like I think that's what we're going to see with this. Like you reminded me of the mute all option, like when you first log in and you can choose whether you want to hear everyone or if you want to have everyone muted by default and unmute them to hear them. I think that's basically the next step of the personal bubble that you can turn on and off. I think that option of interacting, I think that's going to be perhaps what we see as like a protected bubble to the experience of VR chat. But there's also other domains, like the areas of VR chat that aren't necessarily about the physical touching and intimacy, but about the psychological interactions that people have. And I guess we have to decide if we're going to be a community or one community or multiple, or what's the rule of law? Are we living in the same nation? Is this like I think of this as a physical place kind of, but I don't know.
I think for platforms, once you get or not really platforms, but social groups, once you get up to a certain number of people, you just can't maintain a monoculture. You do have people who will never interact on your platform just because the sheer number of people has grown to a point that there's the entire anime culture here. There's this is a fun game, let's go play this here. There are, content creators who just happen to not interact with other people. And you'll have like me and my friends join, just we play together and that's about it. And you'll just start getting lots of separate segments that just don't interact. And one of the sort of interesting things is when sections that don't like each other start interacting. So you get like the people who are in the anime bucket with the people who think the anime bucket is weird and whatnot. and you push them both into the hub, we start needing a way to to solve the problems that's going to create. And I mean, muting people goes a certain distance, and I guess mods go another bit further, but neither of those really feel long-term scalable. I don't particularly know how we scale past that.
What VRChat's looking at is making, it seems like, room creators in the SDK having the ability to create the law of the land. I mean, what do you think about that as an actual, solution potentially?
Yeah. I'm actually kind of hopeful that if the scripting and the little additional things that we get here, which I mean that is very here specific, but ultimately you sort of look at it from the higher scale, and the people who make the worlds that you go in sort of build these tools. I'm kind of hoping that what we'll actually see is sort of a unified set of tools that are like, if you want, whoever was in the room first to have sort of these mod god abilities to kick and ban people, then drop this component into your world. If you're wanting, free form flight, creative mode, whatever, drop it into this sort of thing. If you want, people shouldn't be able to talk, or they should be forced into these avatars. I would like to see that become more of a thing, whereas right now it feels we are under-tooled for a lot of the problems that we are experiencing. So I'm hoping that with scripting and stuff, we can build better worlds.
You're sort of talking bigger picture though, right? You're not talking just VR chat. You're like, in the future, when we get there, we kind of want that system.
Yeah.
Or do you expect that to happen here at some point?
I do kind of expect the VR chat to be the point of contact on, hey, I've got my own world, I can drop in these things. But ultimately, longer term, whenever worlds are not sort of hosted by a single platform, and rather I can go clone somebody's Node.js project and just run a server and point you at, hey, go here, and you will pop into a world that I built and I'm running off of my computer. I'm hoping that at that scale of distributed and, worlds are just anywhere and everywhere, you will still have the same sort of drop-in moderation, drop-in self-governance and things like that, so that we don't have to have a single authority that comes in and you request mod and Pill has to show up personally in order to make a judgment call. Like, those things absolutely will not scale past, where we are today.
I mean, maybe in 20 years, like, Pill will be the moderator of the metaverse. Like, there'll be a giant red smiling.
He will be a super intelligent.
Where are you?
He's always watching.
Super intelligent.
Should we take a question from the Smooth Hip here?
Yeah. Pill.
Oh, the Smooth Hippo. Thank you. Hello. I am the Smooth Hippo. What I think that to take VR chat or a platform similar to this, well, one, I believe that VR chat is why we're all using it, and we're not using something like Alt Space, even though, I'm personally not a VR user yet. But the reason why this is so popular is simply the amount of creative influence we can have over it. We can create our own worlds. We can create the crazy, look around you, like, just do a 360 and look at all of we have a Metal Gear up there. We have some guy with cell shaded stuff. We have Plankton. This creative freedom, this ability to express is what people are drawn to. And I think the next step is to allow, one, the tools are needed. The tools, like Snail was saying, are needed. And the next, which is an issue right now because I believe everything is hosted on, VR chat servers, but the ability to self-govern ourselves, make rules for our own communities. I cannot say the naughty words here. But once, if we get the ability to create our own servers and self-govern ourselves, and then get the tools to do the self-governing, then we can have true thriving of communities.
Do you imagine those tools look like what he's sort of talking about? That if you have the freedom to create a world and then you have these components that you drop in that create the rules, is that all you need?
That's a good start. But as we see here, this game has an amazing amount of ability to alter it as it is. So the ability to sort of create your own tools would be a great thing to add. You know, and more creativity, more freedom to mold the game to how you and the community you're aiming to sort of cater to will thrive. So the way that, yeah. So the tools that are incorporated, but the ability to edit and sort of mold the game to how your community would want it. Because that's where I see these things sort of taking off, is the ability for people to make their own worlds, their own communities. You know, it's virtual reality. It's a reality that isn't governed by the laws of our physical world and not by the laws of our social world.
That's sort of what you were saying, or maybe that's just what you told me earlier. But like, you want us to go in that direction where these components we're talking about are community made. They're not just dropped down from on high. Like, it's not VR chat that says, here's the 6 components you're allowed to do. It's like, what can the community come up with eventually, and then how do we?
Sort of what that's sort of what I mean by, like, I think VR chat's going to be the point of contact. I'm thinking that VR chat, in order to scale to its own like critical mass, we're gonna have to start handing out, like, look, world creators, you want this kind of moderation tools, you want the host should be able to kick people without a vote or something like this. Here's a component, and this will be where you start seeing, like, okay, here's your first 6 components of self-moderation, and when, you know, at some point in time a spec or some standard or whatever gets it to the point that you can now hop outside of just the VR chat bubble and I can run my own thing, these will be the, okay, great, somebody's going to build that tool for that new platform, but I think here's where we're going to start experimenting with them.
Yeah, that's what you were talking about too with Playmaker, and I think that's what we're going to see is, you know, I mean, look, this app used to have a avatar, the marketplace or whatever, where you could download different things, and I think I could definitely see moderation tools being something that are shared amongst people for room creation, amongst other things. Like Playmaker is going to really change VR chat, I think, in a really awesome way because of what we'll be able to build, and these kinds of, I think that's a really good point that you made about that, is that these kinds of tools are going to get really sophisticated, and, you know, we can reproduce them like we can in Unity. Also, I want to remind people to get in line if you have a thought you'd like to share and like a kind of dialogue. I think we have 3 people in line additionally too. So yeah.
I kind of want to go a little bit farther though. Like to get to where he wants to go. Like, do we have to remove that point of contact of VR chat? Like, ultimately, does this have to become a more universal thing, or can we allow one platform to become the main platform? Like, in my mind, I'm imagining Facebook. Like, Facebook takes over, it becomes the point of contact for everyone, and a lot of us hate Facebook, but everyone uses it. Like, is that what's going to happen? Like, what happens here?
I mean, my personal view is a bit different from that. I view it closer to VR chat becomes sort of the effective equivalent of a browser, where you have Safari, you have Firefox, you have Chrome. I think that you'll have VR chat, which sort of allows you to have custom avatars and allows you to build these sorts of phone structures and allows you to connect to these kinds of servers. They'll have their own set of things where, like, VR chat can host a handful of worlds. It's slightly like Chrome would have a handful of pages that it can just go to, that's fine. But ultimately, I think that you can't scale planet scale very well on one platform, and what needs to happen is a platform that doesn't have a single point of failure where that single point is a company. Just when it's such that anybody can go clone a repo and build a world and connect it to anybody else's worlds, I think that's the much more sort of self-healing kind of internet of worlds that will ultimately take place. I think right now we just have, here's a single server or here's a single platform really that allows you to sort of, like, as long as you're connecting here, you get all of these worlds, and then mutually exclusively, if you connect to alt space, you get these worlds. There is no, I can't drop a portal to an alt space world, alt space can't drop a portal to a VR chat world. And I think that fundamentally will eventually go away. and the only way to scale such that anybody can go anywhere is going to be just not having a single point that is a single company or a single ownership model. And so like with the identity thing for Facebook, we still log in through email or GitHub or whatever other platforms people want to roll their own. But yeah, I would assume that there will be a predominant like, oh, well, pretty much everybody uses this enter the like virtual network of worlds through this client. There will probably be a leading client on everybody uses this as yes.
When you talk about these things being connected, I get really excited, and I'm really looking forward to that day. I've got more questions, but let's keep going with the audience, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So who is this?
I didn't want to take up too much
time. Oh, it's
time.
Raven again.
Raven Ari.
Oh, sorry.
Raven.
Well, you're not a collector anymore, or whatever you were.
No, I wasn't a collector at all. I was an Angaran.
Oh, sorry. I also don't know what you are right now, but it's okay. You're still welcome here.
Renamon from Digimon.
Is that related to? Never mind. Go ahead.
Okay, so when you're talking about personal space, like earlier, one of the thing I'm also running into is like people do crazy animations. Like I saw somebody at the end of Gunter's Universe do a spooky skeleton with thousands of particles of that character dancing. Like,
gotta love
that's error. Error does that.
Error model's the best.
Do you think that should be illegal?
So
I don't think it should be illegal. I think it should be a toggle. Turn off animations and that. Like, also custom sounds that you can put on your character. Like, I've experienced a couple times today where my ears are shattered from loud noises. Like, that is unpleasant.
That is really annoying. And I think that, that's why I like, for now at least, that VRChat has Canny.io, where you can go to their, you can suggest things that other people can upvote too. So that's really important. And I think you should post that there. I think that'd be really good.
I'm not on there.
So people can upvote.
Is that not already there? Something like that? That must be being addressed to some degree, right? Oh, that's.
I'm not.
I would assume because like stuff like a loud noise. Okay, like I was playing Duck Season the other day, and it scared the fuck out of me, right? And like and I think we've all had experiences in VR where it can be extremely intense. Like this is a powerful tool that we're wearing on our heads. And so like if you abuse it by whatever, your avatar makes a loud sound to scare people, or something even crazier, just like blinking lights or something that might give someone a seizure, like you could take advantage of this to some degree. Yeah, I wonder how soon that will be addressed.
Yeah, I think you're making an important point about the power of it. I think like the psychological experiences that we have in VR chat, I mean, it can cure PTSD. VR virtual reality can recreate things and cure PTSD for people. So, yeah, I think it's
you could probably give people
really powerful.
PTSD.
Yeah, exactly. That's actually, I think that's a huge risk. I definitely think that can happen. And I think people who, look, the touching thing, I think, can be very hard for some people who, if they've had a traumatic experience and they have that same physiological reaction to being touched, then not having the personal bubble could be a huge trigger. And I've had that with patients where I've known that the bubble's on and I'm more comfortable when I'm with them in the hub or something like that, because I know that they're not going to get necessarily triggered in that way. So I think that it's, these kinds of things are kind of necessary in certain ways to help the psychological experience of the community be the best that it can be. And people ultimately want to come back, because that's also why alt space, I think, isn't as populated, is that it feels different. The psychological experience of the application is different than a VR chat, and that's an important thing that, and like you're saying, Snail, weaving that into the code, that's what's happening. And that's what we talked about with culture too. That the culture is being determined a little bit also by that. So it's interesting.
Also, should there be warnings on certain worlds? Like,
I think that would be really cool, especially if it's like what you're talking about, where a lot of the rules are implemented by the people creating the world. So you can you can warn people ahead of time, like, you're entering this world. Here's what's going to happen if you're affected by ABC. blah 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 blah. That would be
Yeah.
That
Yes. No.
Like,
What were you
where
gonna say?
spheres. Sorry.
I was gonna say
Continue.
with your particle thing, that kind of reminds me of, I think that we should have something that's slightly like ad block, but for your person. Like, I would like to be able to do things like, I don't ever want to render more than 100,000 particles total, or no person should be able to render more than 5,000 particles. And this should just be for me. This should be I want to turn down graphics settings, or
But how
I only want to
sensitive will those
render
be?
the.
Like, people
this
don't know
is-
really how to like, do you think everyone would have the accessibility to those underlying like granular changes, or do you think it would be kind of summed up in options like in the system setting that you've turned on and off kind of
Just
thing?
an advanced options button, you know?
Yeah,
I think this game needs more.
Yeah, it's expanding that.
From a game, it is a game, so from a game perspective, it needs more options. I can't rebind my keys, for example, and I mean it's sort of an issue kind of unique to
Actually,
desktop users. But my fucking my
keyboard, you will be able to, which I'm excited about.
Hell yeah. Yeah, I mean I can rebind keys on my keyboard itself. But
crazy.
my push to talk is V.
Multiple viewers.
It's so far away. V is so far away. My hands are like doing gymnastics over here.
So Unicorn. So I do want to say that. Oh yeah, Ghoster. Let's keep going through the line too, and thanks Raven for sharing. It's been very interesting.
Myself, I understand, and an avatar creator as well, who's kind of gone over the limit at some points with, let's just say, over polygon avatars and ridiculous particle system avatars and all this stuff. It kind of becomes a test to see how far you can push it. And, I never intend to do harm with any of it, but I also don't think of all the consequences that might also come of it. So let's say if I build a world that's supposed to be spooky and scary, and I don't tell people about it, and people come complaining to me because it's spooky and scary, I'm like, oh, well, I guess I should have put that in there. It's the fact that you're building it, and it becomes an oversight that you didn't think of. That most people are trying to, enforce this, where, how do you say it the best? It's like they're trying to make you think of every. Yeah, it's supposed to be courtesy, and everybody should be there should be there automatically. But people don't think about it because they're enjoying so much doing it that they don't stop to think about, oh, this might be, dangerous to somebody.
I'm curious if you can solve a lot of that with like how you can get sort of game reviews by people who have played this game mixed with a combination of like, you sort of know which areas are the bad parts of town. I'm kind of curious if we could get to a point wherein you sort of know whose worlds are going to be, not the best worlds. They're going to say be super high polygon and lots of particles and stuff. And this can be a thing that like you as the creator, you do you. People come in, they say, holy crap, there's way too much here. And they can put that in such a way that before joining this, it's oh, hey, this room is kind of, about a 60-40 split on if it's a good idea because it's got a lot of particles and flashy lights. And if I'm, we'll presumably need some way that you're not just going in blind to literally every world that you ever touch. And sort of large scale, like ENDGAME sorts of things, you do have to solve that problem. Like, this is intelligent browsers will do things like, this is probably a malicious domain. And that doesn't feel intractable for, this is probably a bad world. But that is far more in the future, and I don't see that in VR chat in the near future.
But a simple thing that can be added.
Yeah,
sorry,
it's kind of different. Smooth Hippo basically is best to line. Basically, what we do is like line up if you want to have like a continued exchange for a little bit, or if you have a quick thing to interject, we can, people raise their hands or use the exclamation point emoji. I think that would be helpful too.
He can't raise his hand.
To say. Yeah, exclamation point. I think emoji in general would be helpful for us too to see that.
I never thought about like, so Raven's comment about the toggle. Like, my reaction was at first to reject that. Like, I hate the idea of you giving me advanced options where I have to decide my experience by this, like, checking 100 boxes or whatever. But when you say ad blocker, that gets me a lot more excited, because like it's sort of like you're taking the law into your own hands to some degree. It's like, what do you want to like what triggers you, and you put it all into some kind of program, and it says, okay, now you're never going to see those things again.
Wow,
and then we're going to get into these perfect little bubbles.
It's like a virtual safe space.
Yeah, and then we're all gonna. It's gonna all this whole. Things are going to get much worse, because we're all going to just disappear into a bubble, and we're never going to see anyone we don't want to see, or hear anything we don't want to hear, and life's going to be great. It's going to work out for everybody.
Well, that's what I like about Snail. What you've been saying about this idea of like, kind of, I'm thinking about Reddit, for example, that has like subreddits that are moderated, and Reddit does have some rules that for all communities they can't follow, they've just introduced that, which is controversial, but overall it's the kind of same thing where people can. So it'll be interesting to see if like that is so that there's safe communities instead of just people walking around within the same community and not, but is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? I mean, I like how VR chat is one community. I think it's a really valuable thing about it that I think makes it have such, like what Evolved was talking about with the positive impacts of what VR chat has. I think that's a lot because of its being one community, and people are introduced to other people from other communities, and there's interaction, and it becomes a place where people want to come together. And it's grown from 20 people getting excited about 20 people on a Sunday to 200 people logged in at any time, and that's a big change, and it has a feeling and culture to it that's really important, I think. And so how do we maintain that as VR chat continues to grow? I think that's going to be an important question. But yeah, unicorn. Yeah.
So, yeah, I was. You were talking earlier about how you think that maybe the future of web browsers, or perhaps like internet forums, would be something like this, right? And I was thinking that going forward, if we really are supposed to be like that optimistic and assume that maybe that might be the case, then there should probably be like special safeguards for anonymity. I always have trouble with this word, anonymity, because if you were to confide in someone, like one person in this room, that your name was actually like John Smith or something, and then they went around telling everyone that your name was John Smith, it's like everyone would know who you were, but like you didn't. That's not what you wanted. Like, this is not like real life. You maybe want to protect your identity, and it changes, like, anonymity changes like the tone of every conversation on an internet forum. Like, it's different from Facebook, where people actually know who you are, as compared to Reddit, where you can pretty much say anything you want without consequence.
If you choose to let people know who you are, like I talked to Mike Alger from Google, who he's been in here for years, and he was the first person to bring a 3D scan of his body into VR chat. And he said that, I was like, why did you do that? And he said that his emotional reaction to the social experiences in VR chat are more realistic, and that when he meets the people in real life that he's met through VR chat, that experience is different for people, can be different for people, and also that it's just like a more authentic self experience. So I now did that too. I have a 3D scan of my body in VR chat, which is like, you feel completely different when you do that, so I think that it's like your whole experience of it changes. So the anonymity is important, but like I've also accepted that this is me in VR chat and in the real world, so it's there's a spectrum, which comes back to the community stuff, which is like, maybe people have different preferences of the community they want to exist in. And I don't know, it's just an interesting, the anonymity is really interesting component.
We have a person that wants to interject.
You have a quick.
So the caveat on unicorn, like I get 1.5 anonymity, right? But you also have to understand that the second you tell someone your name, that stops being anonymous. That person now has that information, and because you want to be anonymous, it doesn't. You have to realize that you have to confide with people you trust. You can't just come up, like, you and me can't share personal information, and I can't expect you to keep it to yourself, because I don't know you. Right?
Well, there's
like
yeah,
me
you're
and you
talking about
aren't
public.
Yeah, but you can
buddies.
also make the
But
case.
if I share my information with like Joe, who I've known for a bit, then I expect him to at least try to keep it private. But I'm not expecting him 100% to keep it private, because he now has the information.
Yeah, no,
You know
that's a
what I'm
really
saying?
interesting point. Yeah, I think that's thank you for adding that too. And I'm curious what Unicorn, what is your response? You were trying to respond. And
Well,
also you should get in line if you wanna you should continue. I think it's really interesting. So
I didn't have anything to say about the conversation in general. I just wanted to tap you out off of that.
no, yeah, that is a point about the conversation. I think it's really interesting. Yeah, Unicorn, what was your
I was just gonna say
response to
that, you know, there's some situations where, you know, having your name given out like might be actually be dangerous, you know? Like if people know you for something like maybe you tell people in VR chat that you're gay or something, but you live in like Russia where that's actually a dangerous thing to be, right? Then that's actually a really dangerous situation. Like I know he's talking about personal responsibility and giving out your information, but I feel like,
Do
you know,
think the identity thing, especially in VR, where you have sort of these buckets and an interesting degree of like your real world versus your virtual world, and then there are certainly even per platform identities. You may not want to be known as the same person between things. Like identity itself in VR is probably a thing that we could do several different deep dives into, because it is such a like wide and deep topic for this particular
we have with
platform.
avatars talking about avatars. I think that often gets to that.
Absolutely, it is
like
yeah.
Oh, sorry. Like with the Russia example, like if you're in Russia and you could do the same thing on an internet forum, right? You might send someone a private message and reveal something about yourself that then they could spread in the bigger picture. So it's almost the exact same thing, but the difference is just that I think this feels more real, right? Like I'm more likely to tell you a secret because I feel like I know you better than if I'm just chatting with you. You know, I don't have you're not embodied.
Well, also
right?
that's the new levels of privacy exist in VR chat now. Like, I could bring, like, I've done therapy in VR chat with patients at a drug rehab center, and like we go into a private room and it's invite only, and we have the most intimate conversation, and people are crying sometimes, and just really, you know, intense experiences with one another that are some of the deepest levels of things that people would share. But then we have an example of someone who's disclosing something about themselves and revealing part of their identity. But that's where anonymity comes into play. I think VR chat has a wider spectrum of, you know, you don't have, like, look at the new iPhone that does face scanning. So now our faces are tied to our personal identities in a lot of contexts with those 3D maps and stuff. And like, you know, but in VR chat and in VR in general, we can actually be more anonymous if we choose to be. And so therefore it's like a normal society where people aren't necessarily completely anonymous, and they might go to a private room to share something about themselves with another person, all the way to people who are not that anonymous at all in different levels and those kinds of things.
Man, I have so many comments, but
I think Bayek is flailing a hand as well.
Sorry. I just wanted to hop on and throw this perspective in too. You guys compare VR chat to a forum, and I think there are definitely some similarities to VR chat being a forum, but like it's important to consider like what this application itself affords you. Like, for example, Psych. I don't know who you are. I know that's your real body because you've told me that, but I have no history of like interactions that you've had with other people. On a forum, I could go on and check a user account, check post history, things like that. You know, there aren't really bios like any forum or way of me getting information beyond what I see and what I hear in this room. So I think that when it comes to making and talking about these kinds of things and making rules about them, it's important to take into consideration the capabilities of
It does to a certain extent consider how much data
but man, that really sends me down that route
person.
of like when this all gets recorded, like in the future when this is all data that's stored somewhere and you can play back any situation that's happened in the past. I don't think that's happening now, but I certainly imagine that happening in the future.
Yeah, and that's a Black Mirror episode too, which is crazy. Yeah, you can replay anything that happened in the past. So I want to also try to get through the line as well. So yeah, Riot, do you have anything? And thanks, Unicorn, too. I seriously love
Juju,
that.
did you have something to add really quick?
Oh.
Go ahead really quick. Oh, you might be muted.
I think he's unmuting.
Basically, yeah, you have a very short thought.
There are some people who uses text-to-speech like me.
Yeah.
And now you're super anonymous, similar to the voice modulated person.
Yeah, like Arid Sandstorm was also completely anonymous, and so that's what I thought that was interesting, that conversation was even happening about anonymity in that context. So it's people can choose, and it's a cool thing.
We got to do a whole topic about it, but I'll move on.
Yeah, choosing it. Yes, we should. That would be great. I'll write it down.
All right, go ahead. And we only got like maybe 15 minutes, so we'll try to get through the whole line, and that'll be it.
Yeah, I don't want to hog this for too much longer. This is just a thought I kind of had while you guys were discussing just forms of governance and sort of the mod administrator structure. I think one of the things that should be thought about, like the thought that I had while you guys were having that conversation is like, why don't we have like a VR chat police department? And I thought that idea through. Like, it sounds kind of silly, right? But we're a group of people who are interacting with one another, and like, why is that any different than the real world? Like, why do we have police departments in the real world? It's to control these sort of poor interactions or bad interactions with people in a way that we all agree upon. But I think
so. That's the role.
I don't think that's
necessary right now, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
They're the police. Yeah.
It's exactly what it is. And
yeah, but you know what it is? That's that they're automating the laws. I mean, that's what we're seeing in the real world as well, with legal systems where automated sentencing and things like that by judges and using algorithms and big data to determine things. I mean, we're seeing code be related to the legal system. So it's interesting that you're making that point, because it's kind of similar to some of the parallels of what's happening in the real legal system. The metaverse legal system is mirroring in some ways the dynamics and the practicalities of real world legal system.
But sort of staying on the idea of policing ourselves, that is something that we've tried to, like, I don't want to, criticize VR chat too much, but like eventually we want to get to a platform where something like that happens, right? Where like there could be more moderators and we could like moderate. Like how will that work in the future, ideally?
I'm not entirely sure that I can think of a nice, like, global scale moderation tool. I think that when it starts to turn into a thing where if I build a world and I build a world, I throw it up on AWS or whatever, and people can go in and play or whatnot, and something happens in there, I'm not sure exactly who's supposed to be responsible for maintaining the happy environment.
Right.
Is it me? Like, I don't want to police. That means I'm now personally responsible for everybody else's interactions on my platform.
Right.
And I say that, but it also is a thing where we do find things like the people who run VR chat are themselves responsible for what we do on this platform. If we upload a bunch of Disney stuff and VR chat gets sued by Disney, VR chat is responsible for what we do on here. So, I mean, it may totally be a thing where people do have to personally police the worlds they build.
Yeah, that's why I'm really excited that VR chat. Yeah.
The checkbox that says, I have the rights to upload this content. You check that.
Yeah, exactly.
And looking around, everyone's obeying this. This is all original IP.
Yeah. That's the thing about VR chat, is that it's a company, and that's what I'm so excited about. And I think that's why we've seen it be so successful, honestly, is that, it started with Jesse and Graham, and then now Ron is the community manager who's really in charge of developing these kinds of things, and I think that the approach that they're taking, for example, of making worlds moderate themselves, is kind of a really interesting way to address exactly what you're talking about, Snail. So I think it is ultimately like we're riding a wave that has been constructed for us, that began by an idea that Graham and Jesse originally had and created and just built, and then it's grown continuously from there. And that's like, I don't know. I mean, that's like they're trying their best, I think, to navigate how and what to make. And I think it's interesting. A lot of people have a lot of suggestions. And I mean, I remember back when they had the old UI that was like looked completely different than what we have now. And everyone was always talking about the UI. They're like, oh, we're working on a UI system. We're working on this. Like, they're a small team that has to prioritize what are, like, for example, the safety bubble is kind of like a serious traumatic thing that can happen to someone that was immediate attention paid for the moderation. And so they're having to prioritize what they're doing. But I think that the path that we're on, overall, the culture that exists within VR chat, the success that it's had, and all those things are really strong indicators of the team that's building it, and that's the entire team. And so I think that's what's so exciting, is that we have people who are in charge of this that I think are trying their best to listen to the community and do those kinds of things. And I think this kind of conversation is really valuable for them to be able to hear and listen to and get the input of the community in general about what are these topics and what's important. Because like what's important to us is what's going to be that's an important thing to listen to. Obviously, it's a community and it's the user base and everything. So
you hear that, like Ron, Graham, Jesse. And also, if you're watching right now, like this video and click subscribe. Thank you.
That was amazing.
All right, Ryan, anything else? Did we sort of address that?
Yeah, so just to sort of close that thought out, like, I don't want to suggest that like a police department is necessarily the right thing. The point I wanted to get at was that I think VR chat affords us a lot of very interesting alternative means of governance that wouldn't be possible in the real world. Like, for example, you could point your finger at me with your menu open and click the kick button, and everyone in this room will get a democratic anonymous vote to kick me. That's something that takes weeks, months, or even years in the real world. And I think it's important when we discuss, like, how should we handle these situations to consider what VR chat affords us as a platform.
Yeah, that's why it's so tricky. Like, these are all new. Like, this is just such a new
it's growing
experience.
pains.
Like,
I think it's the growing pains. Yeah.
One thing I do look forward to is right now we are still in the place where VR chat themselves have to implement every rule. And I'm really hoping that if the scripting thing is general purpose enough and well integrated with all of the fundamental core of VR chat, that it can now be users can manipulate sort of VR chat itself, the rules of the worlds that they're building, then you can sort of kind of like democratize the rules themselves. And you can have worlds where only the world creator can open up this panel and get access to the secret world functions, or you can have the first person to join, or you can drop in whatever these are. And once we start getting it to the point that, you can build the worlds that are correct for sort of your therapy-esque things where it is, sorry, this world only ever has 2 people. It doesn't matter if it's, oh, I've got a friend in there or whatever. No, 2 people, end of story. It is, this world physically doesn't allow that. And that is a degree of confidence that, you will be able to instill. And this will be a thing that VR chat engineers didn't have to implement. I will be able to instill that, whenever I'm in my world, even if I didn't make it, I can point at somebody and vote to kick them because I am the content creator and I, transcend whoever is the world like instance owner. And
but
all of
you don't
these
want
little
the people to get
things
fragmented though, right?
Right,
like what if they got too separated into different communities and there was like 10 people on, like it takes a threshold of people to be a member of a community, like 200 or 300, like now there's 24/7 people online, but what if someone creates their community and then there's only like 10, I don't know, those kinds of things, like if you fragment it too much.
I'm thinking that like the thing I'm slightly hoping for is almost this evolution or sort of like gradient descent thing wherein you generate, like, everybody generates their own set of rules, and then it's like, well, mine sucks, but I really like the rule that's over in Invader's Club. So then I go talk to Invader, and I get a copy of his rules, or I get his kick script, and then I take, the pugs management thing, and we sort of can find out what rule sets the community actually wants by just try out a whole bunch of rule sets, and you have a
Yeah. So with the issue of like fragmenting the community too much, I think it'll solve itself because people will gravitate to where the people are. So like that might lead to communities dying off left, right, and center, but there will always be places where people will thrive because they will gravitate towards each other.
Sure, the community will reshape, but it won't get uniformly distributed. You will always find somebody that has a shared interest, and that will start the next little clustering group of people. And yeah, I think that we don't really have to worry about that too much. We won't all end up in a universe of our own. We'll find other people to share universes with.
Yeah, and that's why I like the room building. I like that people can build rooms and potentially drag moderation scripts from other people because, you know, those could be grouped in different categories or something like that. And, you know, have those could be servers or communities or whatever. But yeah.
Next, are you in line? If you're in line, you're the last person.
I can talk.
Okay,
Sure.
you're just the last person. Nobody else line up after them. All right. Sorry about that. Go ahead, Alyssa.
Hi. So, wow, this is awkward. Okay, so my question is more about VR optimization because with VR chat recently, one of the biggest issues that I found is a person with a custom avatar or some other system that they've been able to over-influence particles or something to completely ruin the frame rate immediately for any person that's in a specific VR world.
Yep, I have the same problem.
And while I totally 100% agree that any person that is creating a VR avatar, it's within their own understanding and their own skill set to be able to optimize their character to work in a VR world. So I don't, basically what I'm trying to say is I don't agree with limitations. I think that limitations is in the developer's interest. I still think that there should be some sort of setting client side to allow users to sort of hard limit any particles or any anything that would otherwise cause overdraw or frame rate issues, right?
There's people who do it maliciously, though.
Okay. Right.
Fun video.
Well, I mean, it's good to know that it was initially sort of thought about, right? That said, though, I mean, so I'm a tech artist, and working in the game industry, I know my best sort of methods for optimizing a scene to work in a 90 FPS format, and a 90 FPS scene for that matter. So I don't believe in limitations in that respect. I believe that if I know what I'm doing and I'm able to optimize a scene, that I'm able to develop a scene that would work perfectly well within VR chat. That said, though, there is the point of abuse. And for me, I think that the best way of fixing that in general is having the client side do the optimization, right? Having the client decide, okay, after 1,000 particles, stop. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
I think that you'll get a combination of that ultimately mixed with a lot of people don't have sort of the skills and abilities to optimize or build things, and they're going to hack things together. And I'm really hoping that the solution for that ends up being that like people like yourself can make a market where you say, look, if you want to have an avatar that people's clients won't automatically block for spamming or trying to destroy or have too many draw calls, I will help you, and you can have the I will build you a custom avatar in exchange for money market that will almost inevitably show up out of this platform. And so you'll be able to have the people who know what they're doing should be able to do it because they know. The people who don't know what they're doing, honestly, most of them probably would be, I mean, ability permitting, willing to pay money to just have talk to a person, explain this is what I want, and just have it show up. That is, nobody really likes hunting through forms to find something that's close enough to go put it into this program to delete these things and watch these tutorials. What they really want is just self-expression, and I think that they're trying to do it through any means. Some people haphazardly. This is totally ignoring that there are people who know how to do things and are malicious, which is where you do get to, yes, ultimately at the end of the day, I do think my client should be able to see that this person is abusing it and block them or cap their particles or, auto decimate them and just give them a decimated avatar, whatever it takes to sort of make sure that my experience is still 90 FPS. If it's, if it's just blocking them, then that's what it is. But yeah, I think that a lot of the people, barring the trolls, honestly don't even want to go through building a custom avatar. They just want, I want this body. They want to point at a thing and go, I would like to control that and robot that around inside of VR. Yep.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I do just want to say, so I'm pretty much new here, and I want to thank absolutely everybody, because everybody has been so fucking friendly, and it's been the greatest experience I've had, so that's what I'll say. But thank you for answering my question.
Yeah.
All right, let's all pat ourselves on the back, and we're all so
I
nice.
think Ant wanted to contribute.
Let me just add a little piece to this. As someone who is a known content creator and makes a lot of crazy avatars that do a lot of crazy stuff, I think that we have to recognize that VR chat still is kind of a beta software. It's not like 100%. This is the final version. This is the release. This is the ultimate version of VR chat. So I feel like implementing all these systems to restrict what you can do in a community that right now is filled with tons of people who are getting very interested and want to learn and learn Unity, learn Blender, and learn all these tools and see what can they do. You don't want to suddenly put this big wall in front of them and just make like, nope, that's not going to work, that's not going to work, that's not going to work. And nope, this person might see it, but this person has it configured differently and they might not see it, and you don't know who can see it and who can see it. When you have everyone configuring themselves differently on what they can and can't see, then you're not going to want to make anything because you don't know who is going to see it and who's not going to see it. And then in a situation where people are learning and still learning what they're doing, you don't know what's a bug and what's not a bug. Is my thing showing for you? Is that a bug or is it your settings? Oh, did you check that? You're going to make this complete mess. Instead, the better option would be to have a system of 3 levels. Level 1, a setting where you only see default avatars. And if someone is in a custom avatar, it puts them in a default avatar. And that's the level where it's like, I'm not comfortable possibly getting exposed to custom avatars or getting exposed to something that reduces my frame rate. I'm very sensitive to motion sickness. Okay, you can be at that level. Then the next level beneath that is like, okay, now you get the custom avatars that have been vetted. The avatars have gone through some sort of system that evaluates the performance of the avatar. And if it matches some metric, guess what? You're on level 2. And then you can set your settings so you can see all the avatars that met level 2. And then the final level is just the completely unfiltered, where it's like, okay, I'm at a state where I want to see everything. That's level 3. And then it's such a simple system where I can easily look at someone and like click on them. And not only does it show me their name, next to it, it could show me, hey, what level are they on? Do they see me as I think they see me? So that's my little piece of information there.
That's an interesting idea. Yeah, me too.
I mean, like the current state where you're talking about
that sounds
not knowing if it's working for anyone else is basically like the current state of web development.
Bro, you're really low. I don't know if I can't hear you, but if you hit the escape button or the menu and turn up your mic volume, maybe that would.
He was comparing it to sort of the web and like how it's that's how things are now, right?
Yeah, you don't know what it looks like on Safari or whatever unless you personally go look at it underneath that lens, and people have to play that game currently.
I think it's gonna be kind of a slow process, man. Like, this is all.
One thing I really do like
Can I say something real fast?
Oh, sure.
So I have a problem with only like VR chat because again, I love the community inside of VR chat. I think it's like amazing and great, and it's the people that put in the effort and their time to actually like getting stuff inside of here. But I feel like right now it's very difficult for it to become an actual like metaverse because there's not like a fluid form of integration to being able to just like have models inside here quickly for people who aren't really into like, you know, knowing how to do full-on game design, like going through Unity, having to like go through this process of using a separate program, take off their VR headset. There isn't like a form or function where I can just like start building stuff around me and having collaborative building and doing that sort of thing. So I feel that kind of is like a really big limitation for VR chat right now, because right now the social aspect is amazing, but it's lacking the free imagination that you can actually have for allowing for you know, things to actually be pushed to their limit to actually make a metaverse. So
I think that's a really good point. Like that people have to be able to create what they want and be able to do it in a way that's easy to them, which includes those kinds of
user friendly.
Make it more user friendly. But I also think that what we're looking at is analogous to artists writing a song that's a cover of another song that's very similar to the other song that is the other song but has their own artistic touch to it. And when an artist writes that song, they can perform it to other people to, like, you know, the socialization is a performance in some ways. So, you know, if we keep it limited to building in Unity and creating as an artist a piece of art that is shared with others, that's more like fan art type of stuff that perhaps would be easier than if you walked into the hub and there were Disney characters that you could choose from in the hub that's been built by VR chat, as opposed to like the kind of community building of yourself. Perhaps that's kind of a line to draw a distinction or something. I don't know.
I didn't get the impression you were sort of talking about pedestals where you go and click and you become an avatar. You kind of want like a room you go to for beginners and they can create, they don't have to leave VR chat, right? Like you go into a room.
Yeah, it's in-game building.
In-world construction, which I feel is like really important for a metaverse, and also like being able to profit from it, being able to have like a monetary system inside of the virtual world, because then that actually increases the creativity and makes people like more motivated to actually create compelling stuff for the virtual metaverse. Because if you don't have those sort of like pushes to actually make amazing stuff or get people in the industry, like people who make stuff for like Turbo Squid or something like that, they're not going to feel like, oh, why would I want to bring stuff inside of a world and not have it like free, and then I'm not really, you know, do you understand what I mean? It's not pushing to the point, and you don't have like venues or you know what I mean.
Yeah, that's important, and I think that's, I don't know, I really like that suggestion, and I feel like is that a nugget? I mean, is that enough? Do we have
a lot of that stuff? I sort of assumed it's going to be true eventually, right? Like, I think there's a lot of ideas that we've talked about that, like, I think that like if we talk specifically about VR chat, if they don't implement some of these things, I think eventually that means something else will come in that will and sort of supplant them.
Right.
And so it's up to, but we're sort of still in the beginning where we got to take it easy. Like, you know, this is all new territory, and like they can't just be flipping things around every day, right? Like we have to like crawl in a direction. But I'm hoping all this happens. Like some of the stuff we talk about, like I don't think is going to happen for maybe a decade. Like I'm kind of imagining like some of this is really far off. I want it to happen, but it's not easy.
Oh yeah, it's just good to talk about the future, because then you actually cause it to happen, you know.
Yeah, you have a point to shoot for or avoid, or you know, you have something to give you perspective.
And people have always had these.
That's all that I had to say.
Yeah, thank you. People have always had suggestions.
In the back.
Yeah. Okay. Hold on one sec. Even yeah, people have always had these suggestions in VR chat, which I think is really interesting and exciting. That you know, people have been suggesting things for years, and people and VR chat says, "Oh, we're working on that, or we're doing this," and you know, so that I think they are thinking about the ideas that are brought up by the community, which was an exciting thing. But yeah, Raymond, did you have a quick, maybe a nugget? Are we looking for a nugget? I guess it's been. I think a nugget to
time,
close
man.
the show.
The show's over. But Raven, run up here before you say your thing.
It's just the comments. The monetary thing, that's already happening in Second Life. It's already been a thing. And also Entropia Universe. So that's nothing new. I don't want it.
You don't want it.
All right. Well,
want
that is a future-oriented, you know, yeah.
Before we end it officially, like I just want to, Snail, we there's a lot of stuff we didn't get to today, but is there anything you want to say to close this whole thing down, or?
Oh goodness. I mean, there's quite a bit to talk about. I don't have any sort of single point of like, you know, I don't have a nugget. I am really looking forward to like helping watch the creation of all of the laws of the metaverse sort of be explored and decided on as we sort of move forward on VR chat. So I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah.
We're living through the whole, this is it, man.
Yeah.
Like, this is the process.
This is, you know what? This is the end game. These are the rules that are this is the final medium of conscious existence. So.
All right, well, let's do
a
picture.
Endgame, because that's like the name of End.
I get it, Psych. All right, so let's do it different. Let's maybe line up against this wall just so it's different than all the other pictures we took. So everybody, head over to this wall and let's somehow arrange ourselves so it looks like we're obeying the law or breaking the law or something to do with that. And Evolved Ant, if you're here, I would love you to do a summons or something, like maybe Cactar or something. Something that impresses us with particles.
The frick is going down.
Well, yeah, well.
Hello.
Where are we looking?
I'm breaking the law.
We're looking at Ghoster. He's this invisible camera in the middle of the room over here.
Is everybody actually in the picture yet? Yeah, I can see you.
Plankton, yes.
Does this work?
We're gonna watch whatever Evolved Ant and be impressed.
Oh, why is the lights on?
IFPS.
Oh my goodness, Ant.
Not that one, Ant. Ask for a lot, you got a lot.
I want to see Cactar or something. I want to see one of these summons.
Okay, but Cactar doesn't stay still, so be quick.
Yeah, he'll do it.
A camera?
A camera.
Did you get it?
A sentient floating ghost camera?
Wait, he didn't do the needle attack.
It goes up pretty high.
Come on, I'm trying to do the wave.
Oh shit, it's outside the ceiling.
My god.
Oh my god.
Yes.
Oh well, does that look good, Ghoster?
Wonderful.
I like everyone looking up. That's great.
1,000 needle.
All right. If anyone else wants to crash the system, that would be a great time if you have a crazy avatar that's going to shoot out a bunch of particles.
I'm out of here. See ya.
I think it's time to do it.
Oh boy.
Yo! Hey, thanks for coming.
Irony.
Hi.
Just hang out.
Oh,
No.
my
It's gonna get weird in here.
I'm forced right now.
Before everything goes down the hellhole, I will see you all later. Enjoy.